Yo, hello everybody.
Hello.
Hi.
We're,
How's it
Hi.
going?
we're tricontinental.
Everyone's in
That's-
different places.
I
Different
know,
places.
Yes.
yeah. It's
Even me.
extraordinary. What an
I'm in
extraordinary
Wales.
time to be alive. I've got
Yes.
my computer's on my lap, so I might be doing this a bit. So I'm actually at sea. No, I'm in an Airbnb in Newcastle in Australia, which is a seaside town. Very pretty, and I just had a lovely dinner with a bunch of very nice people, two of whom I've actually been in touch with before. One who is trying to save her daughter, who's got a lot of problems and has been sucked into this stuff, and another who was an artist who oh, there he is, who's an artist who was cancelled, but she told me tonight that because of our interview that they actually, or I think I did a Substack piece on her, they actually reversed that decision, or they found it hard to cancel her. So it was a very satisfying night for me. Very
Good.
pleasing.
Well,
Yeah.
Plus,
Yes.
Amazing.
past review.
Amazing.
And hashtag turfs were right, hashtag Glenna was right, hashtag for Christ's sake, what the hell took them so long?
Yeah. What a week. It was so
Yes.
great. It's hard to. They're not my jammies. This is a shirt. Someone said this is my jammies. Yeah. No. What a week. I mean, people have been saying to me for a while. I hope one day you get your vindication or whatever, and it seemed to happen this week. I mean, the cast report came out, and I was quite surprised that so many people tweeted Glenna was right. I was very flattered. Obviously, I felt, there's a little bit of embarrassment because there's so many women who are right also. And you don't want to be taking their space in this fight. But, after 6 years of fighting this stuff, it was it was a lovely thing to see in Australia, Made it hard to sleep because it was all happening during the day over
Yes.
there, which is the night over here, But,
Yeah, you've been over there for a little while now.
huh? Yes. And I'm here till May, so I'm still here for a few weeks. We got some more, like a book launch in Sydney, a few more comedy classes. We're going to Brisbane and Perth. So yeah, it's really nice. It's.
But I think the thing about the Glenna was right is that, I mean, it's because you've been so publicly vilified. I mean, lots of women have also been publicly vilified, and loads of us have been privately vilified, and etc. But it is, it is one of these things that just draws attention. Again, just that Glenna was right. I mean, I saw a lot of turfs were right going around as well, but it is a sort of vindication because of the massive public vilification that you've received over something that now, interestingly enough, have you seen the massive reverse ferreting? I mean, all along we thought that we just needed more evidence-based medicine, etc. Did you see the
You're talking about Ruth Hunt, of course.
Yes. The shamelessness of Ruth Hunt was something to behold.
Yeah.
Yes.
No, for those who don't know, Ruth Hunt was the head of Stonewall UK, the large gay rights organization, which was really at the forefront of pushing gender identity ideology. And it was especially during her tenure. And then she was given a peerage. So she's now a member of the House of Lords. She's Baroness something or other now.
Yes. Yeah.
And it's disgusting. And I've always secretly fantasized that she should have her peerage stripped. But I didn't know that was really a thing that was possible, because the deal is she was given a peerage ostensibly for her services to gays and lesbians.
Yeah.
And now it's become very, very apparent that she did not do good services to gays and lesbians. And in fact, she is the butcher of butches, as it were, So she should really have her peerage taken away from her. If it was given to her as the Lords' attempt to sort of do right by gays and lesbians by giving a peerage to a gay rights champion, they picked the absolute worst one they possibly could have. And now it's really, really, really apparent. It's just very, very quick.
Well, I know there's a petition going around that Simon Edge has started. I think there's somebody looked at the rules, and the only thing that you can get your life peerage stripped as is for treason. However, she should absolutely resign it. she should have the humility to say, I'm handing it back. I'm resigning it, because it's so apparent the harm that has been caused now. It's there. It's written down in black and white. Yes. And I'm still, as you say, Artie, it's incredible how she said, well, we trusted the experts. You know, we were like, we could understand it. We saw it. Why couldn't you?
You were the experts. You positioned yourselves as the experts. You went to every single organization in the UK and said, we are the experts. You do right by us. And then to turn around and be like, oh, we were just listening to the experts. We had no idea. Her period has gotten to her head. She's turned into quite the snob, hasn't she? I couldn't believe it. I saw a clip of her speaking. I didn't realize she had been such quite an insufferable, snobbish person in the way she speaks. And the disgusting, that article where she literally pretended that as though she was just above it the whole time and they just had no idea. And speaking as though like, well, isn't this just shocking? Like, these poor lesbians. I mean, who could have? I know. I really wish that someone would tell them that they're not boys and that they're just girls. And it's like
that disgusting. That was the most disgusting thing she said. Said, I have a dream that lesbians can come in and be told that they can be women and be gender non-conforming. That's exactly what Stonewall and other organizations told them they couldn't be. And for her to turn around, the great thing about it though was, thankfully, Lucy Bannerman was the one who wrote the piece. So she being one of the few journalists who's across her brief on this issue, was able to just pick her up on everything. So it was really delightful to see, you know.
Yeah, we have receipts.
We have the receipts. And one thing that I'm kind of going to be doing when I get a little bit more time, obviously I'm kind of running about a little bit over here, but one thing I'm going to do is I'm going to keep, like, basically one thing I always knew is that all the stuff I was doing on the Glinner update and all the stuff we were doing here, reporting on this stuff and interviewing people, I kind of thought that there will come a time, even though it's not actually hitting the newspapers, it doesn't seem to be making much of an effect, there will come a time when this stuff will kind of gain a kind of retroactive newsworthiness. So, for instance, when they were trying to push self-ID across the UK, who is in Stonewall's trans advisory group, pictured right next to Ruth Hunt in the photograph of them, other than Amy Challoner. Amy Challoner, who is married to a paedophile, whose father was a paedophile, who shares the same nappy fetish as her father, his father, excuse me, and for a long time had influence in Stonewall and therefore across society. So basically what Amy Challoner, this incredibly disturbed, fetishistic, probably autistic, deeply damaged, probably groomed young man, Amy Challoner basically influenced policy in the UK police, across the civil service, in schools. Certainly we know in girl guiding, right? You know, because girl guiding, Amy Challoner took great pleasure in associating himself with girl guiding and their trans-friendly rules, which allowed men to skip checks that would normally be assigned, men would normally get, unless they would be able to skip these checks if they identified as women. So the whole thing. Oh, and sorry, my last little thing, not about Ruth Hunt, but let's not forget as well that this same person, Amy Challoner, also persuaded the mayor of London, said it can, to remove the words "ladies and gentlemen" from tube announcements. Okay. Yeah. So this is how much influence this deeply disturbed fetishist, who is at the very least pedophile adjacent, had across British society. So I think
it's still not really broken, has it? I mean, you've talking about it for such a long time, and it's still people. But then, look what's happened with the puberty blockers. So many people were like, well, it's just a pause button, repeating the mantra. It's just a pause button. It's just a pause button. Cast report comes out. Suddenly, everyone, I mean, pretty much everyone is, I mean, there are still a few people defending puberty blockers, but most people have now realised and are just completely reverse ferreting and saying, well, you know, we always knew that the evidence wasn't really there. However, you know, just in the meantime, but now that we've got the evidence, it's absolutely fine. These people were absolutely pushing them up until, well, yesterday.
Yes.
So, you know,
and Ruth Hunt, remember, Ruth Hunt, we signed it. I think you may have signed it, Helen, you may have signed it, Artie. We all signed a letter that was written by Johnny Best, and all it said was, please look again at your trans advice. Please try and bring down the toxicity of the debate. Johnny Best wrote this letter. Stonewall, under Ruth Hunt, said no within the day. You know, and the idea that she says she was fostering any kind of debate is an absolute insulting lie. And the one good thing about her interview is so many people are angry. I noticed Alison Bailey made a rare appearance back on Twitter just to say, yeah, bullshit, because you were the reason I was bullied out of my chambers at Garden Court Chambers. You were the reason that so many lesbians. That, you know, lesbians, like, I've been here in Australia, and the same ethos is across Australia. I met a young lesbian in Hobart who is banned from having lesbian only events, you know, and it's the same all over. There are no lesbian bars anymore because all of these places admit men like Roxy Tickle who say they're women and kick up a storm if they're not allowed into female spaces.
Yeah.
So
the no debate thing is like, who are you kidding? I thought no debate was created by Stonewall. You know, the idea that they're literally just, I literally thought that's where it came from. I thought it was a Stonewall slogan.
I checked yesterday, and they're still selling the "Some People Are Trans, Get Over It" shirt. So if that's not no debate,
that's basically no debate.
It is.
It's amazing that
that was a hashtag for years. Like years, no debate. People were saying no debate, no debate. And now I see people, I mean, I find it particularly interesting because when I do debate, I am always polite. And so I see people saying, no, it was always, Kirsty also, yesterday, no, it was always possible to debate these things. It's just that, you know, you just have to do it politely and rationally. And I'm like, I'm genuinely, like, I'm so polite. I never swear to it at anyone on Twitter. And yet I've been vilified. I've been doxxed. People have gone after my job. I'm called all sorts of things all of the time.
Yeah.
Like, so it's just this idea of, she then went on to say, well, I've been always been fine. When I talk about it, I don't get any shit. And you're like, yeah, no kidding.
Yeah,
because you're on the other side.
Because you're on the other side. Yeah. So it's just extraordinary, you know. And did you see James O'Brien? James O'Brien was particularly funny. He said the only people who were right? The CAS report comes out showing that children have been hurt. And James O'Brien's big brain contribution is the only people who come out smelling okay from this are those of us who said that the debate was toxic. Which was like,
oh my God.
Yeah. So, you know, I mean, they're all going to
the only people who came out right after the Second World War was Switzerland. That's basically what you're saying. It's like, I don't think so, buddy. Chamberlain. Nice. We look fondly on Chamberlain.
Yeah. I know it's crazy, but it's like, I mean, you know, but there is a part of me. I've seen some people, like, for instance, Kemi Badenoch today. She said, let's not get too over optimistic. Labour could get in and reverse all that stuff. But
have you seen? But Labour, I think, well, there's certainly Streeting has pledged or has said that they need to follow the recommendations.
Streeting said he went further than that. Actually, he said something very interesting. He said, "I should never have said trans women are women." Now that's pretty strong because that was always there. Like, I remember when I first broke cover, people would try and force me to say it. Do you think trans women are women? Right? Yeah. It was almost like a religious observance. Yeah. And I at first I wouldn't answer, you know, because I just thought there's no right answer to this question. But then eventually I would just say no, Of course.
Wait,
not.
Helen, did you say Kemi Badenoch is actually saying we should be careful about this? It could be rolled back.
Yes.
That
Yes,
is so. The incumbent political party in the UK is now essentially campaigning on the gender critical position aggressively to maintain there.
Yeah.
That is, who would have ever imagined that even 2 years ago when the tide was really starting to turn?
Yeah.
We're
Though
now coming up on almost 4 years of the mess we're in, by the way, which is crazy.
Oh, really?
But like even 2 years ago when we were really had the wind behind our backs, we couldn't possibly have imagined that it would actually be campaigning that you could lose the gender critical position or it could be rolled back to save a political party. They're actively campaigning on it.
Yeah, well, I think as Dennis is saying, Badenoch is electioneering because Streeting has committed Labour to implementing CAS, and he has, which, let's face it, I suspect Labour's going to get in. So this is great news because I think one of the excellent things about this is that they're losing the kids. They built the whole fucking pyramid on kids. It started with some blokes who know full well that they're just women, and this is them trying it on. They're just taking the piss. They're literally taking the piss, and they got the kids on board. They got all of the parents of all of the kids to prop it up so that they could have their sort of self-actualization as a woman, knowing full well that they weren't. But now the CAS report is undermining it. It's just going to pull that bottom layer of cards away. And hopefully that means everything will collapse, because without the kids, they really have not very much. Yes. And I think more than this, I do think that all of these companies who are now, she, her, etc., in their email sort of signatures with their badges, I do think they need to rethink this, because what this is doing is promoting the trans identity as something really positive to children. Whereas the CAS report, I think, has been very, very clear on the fact that it's even suggesting that, I know the Transgender Trend has done this, and I think they're right, that even social transition, alters the path of how the child...
Social transition is just as evil. It's just as evil. Social transition... Social transit, to confuse children. I hate to quote myself, but on that Newsnight interview, I said, you don't tell children they could be born into the wrong body because they're children and they'll believe you. And that's what, and I also been making the argument recently that, if my kids stop believing in Santa around the age of 10, but imagine if all of the media, all their teachers, their parents and everyone else in their lives, their school friends, were saying, no, it's actually true. Santa comes down every Christmas and he drags his big fat body down the chimney and he brings a huge sack of presents with him and he gives you a few of them. Children might still end up believing that far past the point when they would believe it, because they would never think that adults would lie to them. So
it's even worse than that still, because children have neuroplastic brains, particularly around formation of identity as their children. So if you're hammering into a child your identity is the opposite sex, when you look at a room full of boys and girls, you're really a girl and not a boy, or vice versa if it's a girl. And that's constantly hammered into them while their brains are wiring up. Right in that period when they're wiring themselves up to figure out who to align with, that's going to cause some great amounts of suffering when their brains kind of settle in and chill out and harden and gel in their teens, and they suddenly realize they're not like all the other girls. They're actually like boys, and they have to suddenly unlearn everything, which is much harder to do when your mental nerves have settled down and gelled. In childhood, if you're taught something, you're going to learn it. If you're taught that Santa's real, that doesn't affect you for the rest of your life because your brain isn't looking to figure out whether Santa is real. But if you're taught that you're the opposite sex, that's going to affect you because your brain is trying to figure out all kinds of things, like what sex you are.
You're right. That's you're right. It's not. Maybe that means it's not.
No, it's a great metaphor, but I'm saying it goes even further.
Yeah. No, but you're right though. That's one of the things that I always found so offensive about the whole idea. As a writer, right? Because when you have words that are as fundamental to not just the English language, but to our understanding of humanity as male and female, men and women, mother and father, and you start to kind of chip away at the meanings of those words, you break our relationship with each other. You break our relationship with our ancestors. You break our relationship with the entire history of human creativity, right? And so, like, there was something, oh yeah, I met a woman today, and she worked in a breastfeeding charity. Already, when I say that, you can guess where this is going. And she,
what's a breast? I think they're just called chests now. There's no such thing
yeah,
as a
yeah,
breast.
yeah. It was for chest feeding persons, and
No, unless trans women have them, in which case they call it titties with a D.
Oh yes, that's right.
Yeah,
The
titties.
I've heard of those.
Anyway, of course, there was a directive that went around that they weren't allowed to use the word mothers anymore. They had to use the word parents, you know. And she made the point, well, hang on a sec, everyone is a parent, but not everyone is a mother, you know. And the person she was talking to, who's a young woman, right, one of the kind of types of young women who are somehow seduced by this nonsense, said, I hate the word mother. I hate the word mother. And that really sent a chill through me, you know. I mean, can you think of a word like, you know, when soldiers are killed in action, that's the thing they shout. They shout for their mother.
Exactly. They shout
you
for their
know,
mothers. Yeah.
And for you to come along and say that this word means nothing or that you hate it, how dare you? You know?
Yes.
I mean, so as a writer, I always, you know, it wasn't just women's rights or my career that I was fighting for. It really was the ability to just be a writer and to actually make sense of the world through language, you know?
Yes.
So,
yes,
yeah,
absolutely.
Anyway. Yeah.
But I think I just wanted to add to just what I was saying there about the kids, because there was, and I know I've mentioned this before, an excellent article on the Transgender Trend website, which was "A Childhood is Not Reversible." It's called, and it just makes these points so clearly by a trained clinician. And I do think that all of these companies really need to reconsider the sort of the veneration of a trans identity that they are doing on the back of this CAS report. I mean, really, like they really, because they're complicit in this. They've been absolutely complicit pushing this identity on kids by saying that not just is it, it's not neutral. It's a great thing. It's a great thing to have, you know, all the celebration. Let's celebrate being trans. And, you know, what's actually happening is these fucking poor kids just being damaged. You know, we've been doing this for 4 years. The CAS report has been 4 years in the making. That's 4 years of kids, 4 years worth of kids who have been told that they are trans, who are being affirmed that they are trans.
Yeah.
And who have now, you know, I think Kathleen Stock wrote an excellent article and it's actually been published today, I think in the Times or maybe the Telegraph. And in it, she uses a phrase which is the right to an open future.
Yes,
I think this is such a brilliant way of putting it for children. If you affirm this trans identity, and if you do the puberty blockers, etc., then they don't have the future that they should have had, and they obviously can't consent to it. They can't consent to something that they have absolutely no idea about. I wasn't interested in having children at all until I was in my late 20s. I'd always thought, no, I don't want kids. I don't want them.
Yeah.
Until my late 20s, man. And then in my 30s, I really wanted them. You know, I had one, and then I was like, I want more. So this right to an open future, I think, is so incredibly important. And I'm really angry with all these companies for just jumping on this bandwagon and pushing this shit.
And of course, it's reflected. The lack of an open future is reflected in the way you know, trans culture is such a fucking dead end. As I've often said, there's no music, there's no art, there's no literature that's come out of trans culture that means anything. But what you do see in terms of how they present themselves is a completely infantilized form of fashion. You get these fucking dungarees, the bumblebee jumpers. These are like grown adults who still look like they're toddlers, you know?
Because it's so simple. It's a simplified world they're living in, but it's also like a pyramid scheme. Like they can't, it doesn't work, and the only way to even try to make it work is to get more people into it. You always have to get more surgeries. You always have to get more trans people. You always have to get more, because it never functions. And the second, I mean, honest to God, even with the Cass report, that's just a sort of an analysis of just the medical treatment of this stuff in a very sort of material way.
A very specific
concept of trans even shouldn't have even gotten to the point of requiring any of that, because the very concept of doing this, even when you say it's possible, even if you're examining whether it's possible that a child could have a better outcome identifying as a trans person than as not, and going through these procedures, that is contingent upon there being a massive social cultural environment that supports this concept of trans. That's already assumed, it's already granting that society is going to accept the concept of trans and that this is a thing that exists. So, I mean, even that is 10 steps too far. I'm not criticizing the Cass report in any way. I'm just saying anytime that someone says that there even is the possibility for a good outcome when you cut off perfectly healthy breasts or cut off perfectly healthy testicles and a penis and do all these alterations to your body, that's already assuming you're living in a social environment where all of these conditions are somehow make sense, and they effing don't. And another problem,
absolutely. I call it the kind of Tinkerbell effect. It's basically the only reason that people think trans is a thing is because everyone is wishing at the same time. Everyone is kind of holding this stuff up by virtue of nothing except their desire that it be held up. And there's some people who hold it up with more strength than others, like the parents of trans kids, the people who've adopted a trans identity. I mean, one thing I do worry a little bit, because there's an interesting thing that's going to play out now, right? Because we were talking earlier about the reverse ferreting that's going on, and the incredible bald-faced lies of Ruth Hunt in saying that she encouraged discussion. While I'm at it, by the way, Ruth Hunt, tell that to James Dreyfus, who signed the letter asking you for a less toxic debate. He's barely worked in 4 or 5 years. That's because of Ruth Hunt, and that's because of the lunatics and people like Joanne Harris of the Society of Authors and Clara Villami and Neil Gaiman. That's because of all these people who held up not only the view that there was a thing called trans and some kids wear it, and they had to cut their breasts off if they were going to be happy, all this stuff. Not only that, but like the kind of the thing that went alongside it, which was that everybody who said that this isn't true was a Nazi. In the case of Posey, the way they smeared her, or was obsessed like me. The only reason I was obsessed is because no one else was writing about it, because journalists weren't doing their jobs. So it's this mass failure of society. Anyway.
No, I think what Artie said there it's such a good point, isn't it? That because it does requires everyone else to buy into it. I think when I think it was John Pike that made the point where people say trans people are always going to be here, we're never going to go away, and he said the opposition is never going to go away, like we're never going to stop opposing this. It's not
too important.
So right, it does require a pretense that society is accepting of this. We're not accepting. And if we hadn't been non-accepting, if we hadn't made such a fucking fuss about it, then the Cass report would never have been commissioned. We forced this, like all of us who have made this fuss in the it just makes me so angry. The way we have had to fight every fucking step of the way, and every fucking step of the way we're proven right. And we've had to fight so hard.
And there's still so much more to do. The Cass report.
Of course, everyone knew this, surely. But it was just the way you said it.
The Cass report only got about half of the work that it could have gotten done because, as we have now learned, what was it, 6 out of the 7 clinicians since they broke up the TAVIS, since they broke up JIDS and turned it into all these little local mini clinics, 6 of the 7 of their heads obstinately refused to cooperate with the Cass report on the subject of giving them follow-up data. And you know, and I know, we all know exactly why they were refusing to give their follow-up data, because the Cass report wanted to know how many of these people dropped out and detransitioned, and it's probably most of them, not just a handful.
You know,
so now they've relented and said, fine, we're going to give you the data, but it's too little too late. It's 4 years on, the Cass report is done, and now they're like, okay, fine, we'll give you the data, because they're about to lose their job.
But it'll be really, really, I think it's quite key to see it, because I suspect what we will find that it's terribly.
Oh, shit.
Oh, no. Helen,
but this will come to light.
Sorry, Helen, you cut off there. Could you say that again? This will be. You think it's really important that it does come out because? Well,
because I think it'll come to light that it was really badly done. That there was no follow up. That the records were shoddy. That and even possibly that the outcomes were terrible. So I think
I think it's that last. I think it's that last thing, Helen. Like 9,000 people. Do you really think that, like, of that 9,000 people, that anything like even 50% is going to say, "Oh yeah, I'm having a great time"? You know, no, they're not, because we know
they quietly drop off. We always know they quietly drop off. You know,
but not just that, but they get really damaged. You know, they like. I met a woman. I met a woman today who told me about. I think it was a cousin of hers who had a double mastectomy and then had to have an emergency, or there was a word for it, but it's not emergency hysterectomy, but it's something like that. Anyway, she had a hysterectomy. Of course, now she's going into early menopause, right? Yeah. The young woman. There are going to be so many stories like this, you know. There's going to be so many stories of osteoporosis.
There already are.
I know. But like when that 9,000, when all that information comes out,
yes.
That's going to be like the starter and main course of the Cass report.
But it goes to show that should have happened already. Like
sure.
This is the again, not to criticize the Cass report, but it's this sort of system, the trans propaganda machine is so big and so hard to fight. It's almost like scientists don't have the necessary tools because they're playing by the prim and proper scientific rules where they take everything slowly and measuredly, and they use very calm and measured language. And that's all very well and good, but they're up against the Al Capone of the world, and they need an untouchable. They need an Elliot Ness. And you're kind of more of an Elliot Ness kind of character where you're coming in there and fighting back hard, where the scientists are just very, very slow and steady. And slow and steady is great, but we kind of need something a little bit more aggressive. So the thing where all the clinicians had to do was just refuse to give their data. And now we don't have that big part of the Cass report where the whole thing, you know, even scientists, when scientists talk about positive and negative outcomes, they're refraining from stepping in and saying, this whole thing never makes sense in the first place. They're not saying, look, it's still a religious belief. No clinician who even endorses sex changes believes that humans literally change sex. None of them literally do. And they're not telling the patients that because they're acting like good little scientists, like your beliefs about how this is going to actually change your soul are none of my concern, my secular concern. I'm just concerned about your mental health outcomes. That's got to stop. You can't have kids going in there for religious procedures to transform their souls from one sex to another. And for you as a medical professional to absolve yourself of the motive behind it and tell yourself that this is all just about whether there's clinical evidence that this makes people feel better or not. You know what I mean?
Well, they have a problem, right? Because they need to be extremely diligent. They need to make, I mean, we've seen how trans activists have been trying to undermine the evidence. By the way, good luck, guys. That's fucking fucked from the start. You're not going to have any luck there. So they had to kind of do.
Oh, I'm not criticizing the Cass.
No, I know.
I kind of switched over to criticizing like clinicians who are even trying to do the right thing, who are playing along.
Absolutely,
the Cass report's magical and
absolutely. You know? But I wanted to just say, I mean, that's what I tweeted something about this today. I said, please get the information about the 9,000 cases as quickly as possible, because we cannot wait another 4 years. You know, to see what's happened to these kids. It has to be, it has to come in and it has to be parsed and explained to people as quickly as possible. And I think that's the 1-2 punch of the Cass report. You know, the Cass report tells, but this 9,000 people will show. You know, and
I think what Tish is saying in the comments is right as well. It's far more than 9,000.
Yeah.
Some of the kids are referred as adult kids. Yeah.
Well,
Absolutely.
I'm just saying that I
speaking
think
of Tish,
9,000 is a good number.
Yeah.
Yeah, go on. Speaking of Tish, Hardy.
well, Tish has been keeping all the receipts, and you were saying earlier about how these things are going to be newsworthy in the future. Well,
Yeah.
Tish is going to be at the center of all that, because Tish has been,
Absolutely.
like, for example, Tish has been providing excellently sourced quotes of Ruth Hunt lying through her teeth. So well done, Tish. Your hard work over the years.
Yeah.
And also, what was I going to say? Sorry, I was going to say something about Tish, what Tish has been finding out and stuff. Yes, it's going to be an interesting thing because, like, in the past, when we were pre-internet, if you wanted to do reverse ferreting, I never said this, I never said that. There were kind of limited ways of finding out whether that was true or not. But now the barefaced lies of people like Ruth Hunt will be impossible for her to minimize or conceal.
Yeah.
She is fucked, you know.
Yeah.
All of them are fucked, you know.
Reverse ferrets are an endangered species in the internet.
Yeah.
I mean, what we said all along, we have kept receipts, we have kept receipts. And I mean, Ruth Hunt, I mean, the thing is, it was interesting to see, because this is how the whole fight is being played out, isn't it? It's reasonable, rational people versus narcissistic personalities. And if you've got a narcissistic personality, you really have no shame in what you say. So she's absolutely prepared to lie, just bald-faced lie. You know, Lucy Bannerman did provide all of the evidence against it. And it does, you know, you can read it and it's stark. But I don't think she will ever admit it. I think she will always, yes.
That does make sense.
I don't think she will ever say, no, I was wrong here. She will always try and say, well, you know, we didn't know. She will minimize it like that. But as you say, we've got. Hey,
listen, we got about 20 minutes left. Shall we get Cav in? He might be an interesting person to have in on this.
If he's free.
Dennis, are you up for having a chat? Are you up for getting in on this? Because I tell you, there are angry people, and then there's Dennis Kavanagh. He has spent the last few days boiling with anger, right? And that was the interesting thing about the Ruth Hunt piece as well. Maybe it wasn't aimed. Yeah, he's going to come. Great. Maybe it wasn't aimed at us. Maybe it was aimed at a more general audience. But the people who on our side saw it are furious, you know, and no one's going to let her away with it, you know. But it's interesting. But as I say, this is the first time I think in human history that we were able to call people up on this nonsense so quickly and so easily. And I just wonder what'll happen, you know, because it's like their brains will explode or something, you know, because they won't be able to admit they were wrong.
I'm heartened at the way, I mean, reading a lot about things like the banality of evil and the way terrible lies worm their way into the systems, and how whole societies end up getting stuck holding views that individuals within the society don't actually want, kind of thing. All the sort of systemic aspect of the mess. And I'm very heartened to see how the Katz report has landed in the UK. I wasn't expecting it to get quite as much traction as it did, because there had been an interim report already that I thought already sort of gave away the ending, so to speak, but the ending had more news to it. I think this is one of these deals where, you know, the news is a bit of a dog and pony show. Sometimes you need something heavy just to sort of attach a sentiment that's been lingering. I think people have had lingering, growing doubts around gender identity ideology, and they wanted something that is presented as hefty and big to attach it to. So the fact that the Katz report is presented as this big, solemn 4-year massive, and it is massive report, that's sort of a hook to hang a lot of people turning around on, you know.
There's a lot of news reports. You know, there's even the Guardian has been reporting on it, but it's everywhere. And I really hope it's big. It's actually, as you say, Artie, it's actually bigger than I expected it to be, given that we had already got the interim report. But it's
I'll tell you what, like, I mean, you know,
he's sending Dennis the link. I don't know.
No, he's got it. Relax, everyone.
Oh, okay.
But I'm really hoping that this will be the start, because we've always, you know, Turf Island has always been ahead of the curve on this. I'm
I
really
wish
hoping that this will help other countries, say, well, actually, look what's going on here.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, that's the thing. I've noticed someone
Yeah.
just put in the chat there about there's a conversion therapy bill that's just come into play in New South Wales, and there's a gender identity bill that's just come into play in Germany. They are fucked. It's not gonna happen tomorrow. It's not gonna happen next week. But both those measures will disappear in a while, because this whole movement is fucked. If you hurt children, you're fucked. That's the rule.
It's taking so much longer outside of the UK. So we really need your model as soon as possible to.
But I've met a lot of
out.
I've met a lot of Australians here recently. Dennis, I'm going to bring you in a sec because I'm talking and I don't want you interrupting me. I've met a lot of Australians this week, and they all say the same thing. They say we're about 5 years behind you. And I've been saying, don't think of it like that. You're 5 years behind only in the sense of all the structures that British women had to build to fight this stuff. But the work has been done. The caste review, that will speed everyone up and fast forward to a much better place, much quicker. Let's see if Dennis agrees with that or if he thinks I'm full of shit. Hi, Dennis. How are you doing?
Hello. Hi.
Hey,
Hi,
Dennis.
everyone.
What do you think? Did you hear that last bit, Dennis? What do you think? I think that the caste review is going to have an impact across the world.
Yeah, it has to. It's of global significance because Cass didn't confine herself to domestic inquiry. She went straight from the Dutch protocol all the way to WPATH, right? So that is of global significance. We can see that immediately. I think Belgium and one other country now going to pause puberty blockers. It's worth remembering that the gender clinic in Melbourne, in Victoria, is based on the Tavistock. So This is going to reverberate around the planet. I think this is the end of affirmation, apart from the real holdouts.
Canada. We saw an article in Canada that said something like, this might have an impact on Canadians, as if it's like another species, as if this was like a laboratory on mice.
Yeah, they're not
this
like
might Canadians.
Not with our fins.
We've got this in Scotland with Humza and co, who reckon that puberty one side of the border is different to the south. That's just not going to last, right? The Sandyfoot is built on the same model, the Tavistock, and the SNP at the moment are just sort of burying their heads. But that is not sustainable. It's not credible.
Yes.
But I have to say, guys, from someone who started watching you guys in lockdown and Magdalene Burns videos and thought I was going mad and was the only person onto this, you lot deserve huge congratulations for being on this from day one and for keeping our spirits up and for always interviewing, the person that was cancelled every week. So congratulations to you and well done.
Dennis.
Not day one. Helen was in from day one. Graham was in from day two. I was day three.
Yeah. Well, I have to say, I've met so many people over here who said the same thing. I had one woman, she's an elderly lesbian, and she was kind of crying when she was talking to me, and she said that she just thought she was going mad, and she saw us, and it just kept her going. And I met another woman today, a lovely woman called Jude, whose daughter has gone no contact and is severely troubled and has cut off her breasts and they don't even know where she is. And, she has just spent her every moment of her life since trying to write to newspapers, one here in Newcastle that refused to publish her letters. And she just doesn't stop. She doesn't stop fighting for her kid, who she doesn't even see, and she was actually one of the first people that I interviewed on this channel, So, we've always got to remember that, even when it feels like we're running on the spot, we're doing a lot, So I'm very proud of what we've achieved with this channel. Thank you, Dennis.
No,
yes.
Sorry, Helen.
No, I was going to say it's part of the receipts, actually, isn't it? As Artie's already said. So it's a timeline of things that have happened, despite the fact that people can say, no, that never happened. Like I'm seeing it now. Like, oh, no. It's always been possible to do this. No. It was never about the kids. It was about you calling them groomers and pedos. That's all it was.
I think in the first instance, we've got to stop the immediate danger. We've got to make sure kids globally are no longer subject to the gender abattoir. But there will come a time of a second order reflection where we reflect on just how much avoidable misery this has caused. I don't forget, for example, day one of the Alison Bailey tribunal didn't start because she was hospitalized because of the stress that they put her under. James Dreyfus, as a man who doesn't work, of course, that's going to depress you. What this has done to the gay community in terms of the schism in it, in terms of boys being thrown off Grindr because they say they want to date other boys, and worse on the lesbian
people who
app.
spend their lives in the gay community losing their jobs and being totally unemployed and losing all their friends. I'm talking about me, of course.
Exactly. And we've all suffered. I'm emphasizing the gay community bit there because it's the bit I know the most. But the misery that these people have caused with this madness, where all we have ever done is point out the absolutely bloody obvious, right? That's all being a turf is, because we say things like, don't put massive, great, meaty rapists in women's jails because they might rape the women, right? We say, don't mess with Mother Nature with puberty blockers because that just seems wrong. And surprise, surprise, what's your great civil rights campaign got you? It's got you boys who have cancer in their balls now because of you. It is, So I'm
really surprised that the tenor of the way the Gas report has dropped has almost changed my own expectations. I'm honest to God, this is so crazy making. I just want a little bit of normalcy back. But since the Gas report dropped, I'm kind of thinking like, no, I actually want more than normalcy back. I want Ruth Hunt to have her peerage revoked. I want inquiries. I want firings. I want more. There's almost a sense in the UK, at least. I'm going to get in a second to how things are just vastly different in the schizophrenic world of being online in the UK and being in the real world, North America. But like, I'm seeing that like we've been struggling just to get a little bit of normalcy back, and this Cass report and the way it's dropped has made us feel like, actually, wait, we can get all of normalcy back, and this should never have happened in the first place. It's so different in North America, though. Things are turning, but so slowly. The New York Times published a piece disavowing the term trans kids, which I thought was really, really good. It's slow going. Canada is up in the air right now. The Tories are going to take over and the Liberals are going to lose in Canada. So we can just hope that Canada is just acting crazy for now, but the meteor is coming down. So
into the BBC, because the BBC have absolutely been complicit in this. It's not that they've just ignored us. They've actually been complicit. I saw quite an astonishing stat about the rise in girls identifying as boys or children had gone massively through the roof when they broadcast the I Am Leo.
I am Leo, yes.
And they really have been complicit. And I want an inquiry into the BBC as to how this has happened so that they can learn, so that this sort of ideological capture doesn't happen again.
Absolutely. I want my damn society back, right? I want doctors who operate on the basis of science. I want politicians who aren't scared of lobby groups. I want the foundations of the Enlightenment to obtain. I want children treated according to evidence science. I want children's commissioners to stand up for actual children. I want gay rights charities to stand up for actual gay people. I'd like to see autistic charities actually do what they're supposed to do. I want my damn society back. I want the people who put these children, this generation of children in danger, I want them out of public life, out of public discourse, and so far away from a child or a children's clinic that they can never hurt anyone again, because no boy should be walking around with cancer in his balls or looking at the WPATH files. No girl should have liver cancers.
With no balls at all.
Bravo.
And I don't want, I'm so mad about the abandonment of gay rights. I want people to have a reckoning. Like, we only paid lip service to gay rights. all this stuff was being done to gay people, and people were wearing rainbow flags and patting themselves on the shoulder for their gay alliance while they were throwing gay people under the bus. You know, I know people who were like secretly knew that there was gay people hurting themselves by adopting trans identities, but saying it just caused them too much anxiety to think about it. As if like we're not worth a Xanax, we're not worth a fucking Xanax, our lives.
Let me give the best example of this. Let's never forget, right, that Susie Green, who admitted on stage that she cut off her child's testicles because the child was gay. She admitted that on stage, and magazines like Attitude and Pink News and Diva, they brought her to parties, they gave her awards, they lauded her for castrating a gay child and for castrating God knows how many other gay children.
The other kids. Yeah,
so many of those gay institutions were taken over by straight people and straight people's values, and a few gay people who were complicit though too. Andrew Sullivan wrote a great piece saying we cannot forget the complicity of gay people who are so cruel and vicious to the most vulnerable among us.
Ben Cohen,
like
Ben
Jack
Cohen
Kirby,
of Pink News, and his husband, who was a trustee of Mermaids, who teamed up. Pink News teamed up with Mermaids to promote double mastectomies to young girls.
We haven't heard a gay rights movement since 2015, since Ruth Hunt lied to everyone and and told us she wasn't going to embrace the trans stuff. There's been no gay rights movement. All these rainbows, all these lanyards, they're a lie. They make it look like gay rights are powerful. They are not. Stonewall could have stopped this. If Stonewall if they were that powerful in 2015, if they'd read Dr. David Bell's report in 2018 and said to the Secretary of State for Health, this is gay conversion 2.0, they could have stopped this. There would be no need for Cass. And
Susan Evans tweeted this week that she first blew the whistle in 2004.
Yeah.
2004.
20 years ago. 20 years.
Yeah.
And look what's happened in those 20 years. Well, especially the last 10. The last 10 is absolutely, as you say, like decimated society. Really, you know, when people say in the most ridiculous way, well, this only affects 5,000 people. Why do you care so much? And you look around and you see what has happened to free speech, to kids, to institutions, how institutions have been captured, politics. And you think, 5,000 people? I mean, are you fucking stupid?
Yeah,
it's everywhere. It's
I get that every day. It's just about being nice to a small handful of people. I still get that. The very few people I ever get to talk to, they're still throwing that at me, and it's just
there's one of the things I point out to people is trans means opposite, right? So trans women means men. Trans man means woman, and so on. But in the same way, we've had, however many years of people doing the opposites of their jobs. We've had journalists covering up the truth. The Guardian, Kath Viner of the Guardian is also should also be held accountable. The Guardian is kind of a Bible for progressive people. They won't buy any other paper, and she has deliberately covered up what's been going on. So you have the Guardian, you have the BBC doing the same thing. You have doctors making people sick instead of making them well. Everything is upside down. And
you're taking gay people and making them look straight. You've got straight people taking over gay rights organizations.
Yes.
Exactly. We need an inquiry into this because the failure has been systemic. Every single safeguard, every single thing that should have saved these children comprehensively failed, right? And the result is now very, very harmed children. We cannot, as a society or as a gay rights movement, risk having this happen again. And there need, I'm afraid, in some cases, to be prosecutions for what has gone on, because this medical scandal is not thalidomide. It was called out contemporaneously. 2018, Dr. David Bell was saying homophobic parents are bringing their children to the Tavistock. He was saying that years ago. All right. There have to be prosecutions for what is going on.
Even further back than that, clinical studies we knew what transsexualism was decades ago. We knew what led to a small child growing up and having persistent dysphoria. We knew what middle-aged men claiming to have dysphoria were doing. We knew this decades ago. So we need to go back even to that systemic. What the definitions of trans, we always knew what they were.
We've got to get real post-Cass, right? We've got Susie Green this morning saying she doesn't care. She's going to open a helpline and give people puberty blockers and cross-sex hormones. We've got unions saying that they'll defy the school's guidance. We've got hospitals in the Cass review who defied the Secretary of State for Health in as much as he's appointed Hillary Cass. This cannot go on. All right.
Yeah, this is where I get a little annoyed at your lax conviction policies in the UK. I mean, it's great. You shouldn't be throwing everyone in jail like North America does. But at times like this, I'm like, I kind of wish you would just throw everyone in jail.
I think Dennis's point about we've been calling it out contemporaneously is an excellent one. You're right. It's not. We're not looking back and saying, "Oh, how did this happen? Let's do a huge review." Like, we've watched it happen. We've been documented happen. We've been every step of the way saying,
this episode is not that much different from every other episode we've done. We've always said the same things. Yeah, we've always been consistent.
Because they're obvious. They're obvious.
Yeah. Right? Like I always said, do you really need to see a woman raped in prison before you realize that you shouldn't put men in women's prisons? Do you really need to see it happening?
But even then,
you know how many people have actually said yes to that? You know how many people have actually said, until it happens, we can punish them afterwards. It's like it's actually a common refrain from nut jobs,
Sorry, Helen, what did you say?
I think what we need to get back to is the fact that the Cass review is out and it has caused a seismic shift. It's made a massive noise here. Yeah. It's everywhere. It's in the papers. People are, you can see that people who've been pushing this stuff are scared because they are now pretending that they weren't ever pushing this. It's different to say, no, we should carry on. I mean, some people still are, but there's a lot of people who are saying, no, I've never would have done that.
Yeah. Well, that's why there are attempts to undermine it. All these stupid fucking anime avatars on Twitter saying that it's not a robust study.
I heard somebody say.
But you but you can safely ignore them because, you have all these people who are fucking furiously backpedaling. You have and also it's having real effects. Like the government is stopping. What was the recent thing they did? They said they'd already stopped puberty blockers for under 16s, but they did something further, didn't they?
The CQC is going to go after private providers. There is a problem with that, though, because of the structure of private providers. But I understand the government are considering actively how to deal with that. Can I just say, I think Helen was absolutely right. The post-Cass world, it's almost like the spell has broken now. This is not the same world that it was before. And the only people really who are coming out against Cass are hotheads who know nothing and they have no good criticism of her. But I would say this, look at all the people who are being quiet about this. Do you see how quiet Stonewall are at the moment? Stonewall still haven't done an official statement. Stonewall said, we welcome Cass, and then they got eaten alive by by the hordes they used to stick on us, which was delicious, frankly. I enjoyed that. But then they said we'll have a full statement tomorrow, and there's been no full statement. I think there's trouble. I think there's trouble at Stonewall. I think they're arguing. But look who's being quiet at the moment.
Well, look who else is being quiet, and let's not forget, because we haven't done a mess in a little while. Graham's been traveling, of course. The WPATH files dropped just a couple of weeks ago.
Yes, we haven't even spoken about
WPATH is in catastrophic disarray. Well, we know that behind the scenes, there's horrible stuff going on at WPATH. So that's just another prong. I mean, the WPATH files was almost as big as the Cass report. These two things together they put the nail in the scientific part. Like, no, there is no medical justification for doing this to children. And that's all we need is one break. All we need is one break to start talking about trans back on a rational footing.
That's
because
all
it's almost like a whack-a-mole. It's like there are so many. There was never any reason for trans to be, but it's like one excuse gets banged down, and it's so complicated. People come up with another one and another one. But once you put a stop to the medical part, That's that excuse. When that mole pops up, it's broken now. We don't get
Well,
to use that
I think
excuse, and that breaks the spell a little bit, because then we have to start talking about, okay, people don't literally change sex. This was literally just a sort of pragmatic attempt to help people's mental health, and now it turns out that doesn't work. Once you start saying that trans women are men with mental health conditions and this was supposed to help them, and it doesn't, everything kind of collapses from there, you know.
Well, can I just say on that matter, I've been thinking this for a while, and Dennis, I think you possibly think that I'm maybe, you know, that this is not like the most important aspect of it, but I think it's certainly a part of it. Like, you know, one of the real problems we've had over the last few years is the recruitment going on by trans influencers, people like Copra Points, people like, you know, Montgomery, all these people. They have basically been, these grown men, right, who probably don't have any, have not had any procedures done on themselves, who've been saying that these drugs and these operations are essential for children. And the way they convince people, the BBC is still falling for this because they interview trans people all the time. Oh, I always knew I was trans. I always liked pink. I always like playing with girls' toys. You know what I mean? And it's like that all that anecdotal bullshit is about to be just completely undermined. You know, because you'll be able to say, well, you were lying. You were not only lying, but you were criminally wrong.
You're retconning your AGP backstory, and the most vulnerable children pay the price for your fantasy. I don't discount
counterfactual. Yeah, they've always played this counterfactual game, which was like, oh, I wish I'd have had puberty blockers. Says the bloke who, had he had puberty blockers, he'd have lost the sex drive that has driven him to become a trans woman. It's just not. It's not the.
It's always been a lie, and it's been a lie to conceal the real origin of this and to conceal the pornographic genesis of an AGP identity, because that's too awful to face and no one could base a civil rights claim on it. So this has always been a lie. And underlying the trans phenomenon and this is going to be further down the line, we're going to have to grapple with its relationship to pornography and how that has corrupted and fundamentally changed our society, because about the time of social media, we just unleashed a torrent of this on a generation. And now we've got a generation who want to look like characters from pornography because that's the aesthetic they measure themselves against. And then in the case of trans men, as we see in the gay community, they talk like they're in a pornography. They've become walking, talking porn. And underneath all of this, now we've won the battle of ideas with Cass, which is what we've done. The battle of ideas is over. Once we win the battle of reality and get our damn enlightenment back and get our society back, we then need to have a serious reckoning with what happens when you fundamentally change the information processing and the information available to humans. Because I think it turns out that if you saturate a generation of young boys with all the porn they could possibly consume, then surprise, surprise, they start to look like it. And that is something underneath all this that we need to get hold of.
And the Cass, and I'm glad to see that the Cass report didn't shy away from that. You know, she did mention the pornography aspect, which I think is really important, because, you know, because what it's done now is that it's paved the way for loads of people to do loads of research on all these different aspects, and it is really important. And hopefully they can get it done without being so shouted down, because, you know, this is now kind of mainstream stuff. It's there, and
the dam is burst now. Cass is going to do for medicine what Forstater did for civil rights. Once we have one Cass. The government have already announced there's going to be an adult version of Cass now, partly to deal with these gender clinics and their intransigence and their disobedience. And I would expect regulatory action. And as you say, Helen, I'd expect a proliferation of studies now, because Cass has now given everyone permission to do actual evidence-based medicine in this area.
Well, listen,
it's a good point about porn, because it has to do with social media too. I think we're already starting to see a trend where we're going to take the smartphones away from children. Children should not be put on the information superhighway unsupervised. This is social media, like you were saying, not just in the aspect of porn, but in the aspect of just social media as a medium for communicating misinformation and disinformation and for cults forming and mass hysterias and what have you. We have to do something about that. So starting with the kids, we should be taking smartphones away from kids, giving them dumb phones. Yeah. Sorry,
I like all that. Listen, I'm going to have to go because it's really late here and I'm knackered. So I'm just.
Well, I'm glad we could get together.
Yeah, it's good to see you all.
Yeah, and lovely to have you here, Dennis. You're always a brilliant person to bring in on this stuff. And if you're around next time, we might bring you in again if you're up for it. But yeah, keep fighting. I'm in a group with Dennis, and it's really inspiring how angry everyone is in the group. It looks, yeah, it's just.
We should carry on being. We're going to carry on being angry until the end.
Yeah. So let's keep fighting. Everyone at home, thank you for watching.
Thanks for joining, everyone. A terribly short notice.
Yes. We will try and do another one before I leave. I'm here till May the 3rd, but we'll try and get another one done.
Let's try and do another one in a couple of weeks.
Okay, brilliant.
All right, guys.
Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.